When winter snow sweeps across the mountains and forests, the test of the wilderness quietly begins, and this shelter before us, built on two giant natural boulders, is a stone hut shelter. That is definitely the most dependable life-saving haven in bitter cold. While the old snow in the mountains has not fully melted, Allo slung his pack on his back, with his loyal dog in tow, and stepped into this barren deep mountain. He planned to beat the next heavy snowfall, and build an all-around, windproof, snowproof shelter on site, to face the coming blizzard and cold wave with ease. After searching deep in the forest for a long time, Allo finally stopped between two giant boulders. The naturally perfect terrain blocked wind and cold. The quiet space formed by the surrounding rock walls offered shelter and safety, making it a top spot for building a wilderness shelter, perfectly suited to the harsh winter mountain environment. Once the foundation spot was chosen, he immediately got to work with a shovel, carefully clearing away stones and debris, slowly leveling out a clean, flat area, to build a solid foundation for the stone hut. With the foundation laid out, Allo used local materials, hauling stones of all sizes, stacking them layer by layer along the rock crevices. He started by building a huge fireplace in the corner. In the freezing mountains, fire was the confidence to survive. This fireplace not only provides warmth and keeps out the cold, it can also cook food, and is the key to the whole wilderness survival effort. By the time the fireplace was finished, fine snowflakes suddenly began to fall from the sky. The mountain temperature dropped at once. A biting chill rushed toward him. Allo dared not delay, and quickly gathered dry branches nearby, shaved dry wood shavings for tinder, and used a magnesium rod to strike a flame. The weak flame slowly grew stronger. Warm air gradually spread out, driving away the chill around him, and adding a touch of hearth warmth to the frozen clearing. Fortunately, not long after the fire was lit, the snowfall in the mountains temporarily stopped. Allo seized the precious window and pushed ahead with the shelter build. He kept hauling large amounts of stone, stacking them neatly around the foundation, building thick stone walls around the entire clearing, planning to fully enclose the living area, and completely block out the mountain winds, to make the walls tight, solid, and windproof. With each layer of stones he stacked, he would backfill with fine soil, and carefully pack and smooth it down, layer by layer. The walls reached nearly half a meter thick, sturdy and heavy, with maxed out wind and snow resistance, enough to withstand the extreme wind and snow in the deep mountains. Once the outer walls were finished, Allo turned to refining the interior layout. He used stones against the wall to form a single bed area, to block the damp cold from the ground, and improve sleeping comfort. He specially cut several flat wooden planks, and laid them neatly on the stone bed, creating a dry, breathable solid-wood bed surface. After handling the interior details, he set about finishing the entry area, using solid wood pieces to assemble a complete doorframe, building a basic protective structure. Once the frame took shape, Allo took out his rain tarp and covered the roof completely, giving the stone hut basic protection from wind and snow. Knowing how strong the mountain winds were, he knew a simple covering could easily be ripped off by gales. So he first tied down the tarp's corners tightly with wind ropes, then dug up moist clay on the spot, packed and buried it along the edges to reinforce it. With double protection, layer by layer, even if gale force winds and blizzard impacts hit outside, the roof would stay rock solid and unmoving. By the time the whole build wrapped up, the snowfall in the mountains picked up again. Snowflakes filled the sky and drifted over the wild mountains. Fortunately, the stone hut was already taking shape. The sturdy, airtight walls and roof perfectly blocked out the wind, snow, and cold. Once the shelter was done, Allo began stockpiling enough firewood to keep the fireplace burning continuously, so the inside would stay dry at all times. A warm, comfortable environment. Then he tied waterproof tarp to the doorframe, used to block the entrance door, trap as much indoor heat as possible, to prevent warmth from escaping too quickly. Busy for most of the day, he also didn't forget the dog that had kept him company all the way. He took out the fresh meat he had prepared. He fed it carefully. After settling the dog, at last, it was his turn to enjoy dinner. Aloe shaved thin sticks of wood into skewers. Fresh chunks of meat were skewered together. It was slowly roasted over the charcoal. As the fire kept growing hotter, the fat slowly rendered from the meat, sizzling softly. The color gradually turned a tempting golden brown. A rich meaty aroma filled the whole stone hut. The place felt full of homely warmth. With the snowfall easing and the wilderness quiet, Aloe sat leisurely on a stone by the door. He enjoyed this cozy dinner amid the wind and snow all by himself. He looked completely at ease in the wilderness. After a hearty meal, the sky gradually grew dark. Night began to settle over the entire forested mountain. Aloe added more dry firewood to the hearth, ensuring the fire kept burning. It was enough to hold back the freezing night air. Then they shut the wooden door. They lay down to rest. In the warm stone hut they had built with their own hands, they safely welcomed their first night in the deep mountains. Thanks to the fireplace's steady warmth. Outside, a blizzard raged through the sky. The weather was barely cold. The room is warm and cozy, dry and comfortable. One man and one dog spent the long snowy night safely. After the night of wind and snow, the next morning, the deep mountains were blanketed in silver. Everything was pure white, peaceful and soothing. Aloe scooped up clean snow and used the charcoal fire to brew a pot of hot tea. The warm tea went down his throat and instantly chased away the morning chill. Just as the weather cleared, the light was perfect. He took down the curtains at the door one by one and removed the waterproof sheet from the roof. Carefully packed away all his gear and supplies. Once everything was packed up, he set off with his dog, bidding farewell to this makeshift shelter of giant boulders. Fully packed and ready to go, heading calmly into the next mountain journey. The cold wind stripped the trees of their green leaves, but those gnarled limbs stood proudly in the open land, waiting for the spring breeze. Today's main character, Aloe, was heavily loaded, with his dogs, stepping into this bleak and silent place, to take in the grandeur of the wilderness. After a long trek, the slightly tired Aloe came to a boulder, and dropped his pack here, planning to settle in for the night. After a day of hiking, he was a bit worn out, and needed to sit and rest for a moment, and then started petting the dog. Then he put together his shovel, and began building tonight's shelter. He planned to use one corner of the boulder for it. First, he cleared away some loose rocks on the ground, then gathered some larger stones, and started stacking them along the edge of the boulder. Since there were so many loose stones here, they were fairly easy to gather, but carrying them took some effort. By the time the wall reached shoulder height, the weather turned against him. A snowstorm quietly moved in, and the temperature dropped sharply. He quickly added another layer of clothing, knowing he had to speed up his work and get the shelter built fast. Even the dogs were curled up from the cold. The urgent priority was to get a fire going first. Aloe hauled over some stones, hoping to use the natural gap in the corner to build a fireplace. After filling the extra gaps tightly with dirt, the makeshift fireplace was done. All the shelter still needed was a roof, and then it would be move-in ready. The snow kept falling harder, soon blanketing everything in sight in white. Aloe even felt like he'd suddenly grown younger. He had to get the fire going quickly. There was certainly no shortage of firewood here, plenty to keep him going. After bringing the firewood back, he scraped fine wood shavings from the small sticks with a knife, then lightly scraped off some magnesium shavings, and mixed them together. With sparks flying from the ferro rod, the fire caught. He slowly moved the fire into the fireplace, and the snow on the firewood still needed to be knocked off before he could put it in. As he kept adding more wood, the fire grew stronger. Once the fire was burning, Aloe carried some wood to the top of the fireplace and dropped it straight down through the chimney. He wanted the fire to burn as strongly as possible, so he could heat up the stones and warm the whole shelter quickly. After that, he took his well-worn tarp and rope and went outside. It was time to seal up the roof. He spread the tarp out on top and at the corners and edges, He weighed it down with stones, then secured it with rope. That would keep it rock solid, so a storm wouldn't blow it away in one hit. After a bit of fussing around, a shelter made of stacked stones stood before him. Once the outside was done, the inside couldn't be sloppy either. He used stones to build a slightly raised platform off to the side, and dug out some dirt from beneath the crack opposite. He spread that dirt over the platform to level the gaps in the stonework. Then laid down a thick moisture-proof mat, and added a blanket, and there was his big comfy bed. The pit dug on the opposite side was lined with a blanket, and that was where the dog would sleep. Outside, a heavy snow had just passed. The whole world had been dressed in white, and the cold was seeping straight into his clothes. But inside the shelter, amid the crackling heat of the fireplace, it was wonderfully warm. The heat from the fire had melted the snow on the tarp, and this was just the lifeline Allo needed. He filled a cup, and drank it all in one gulp. To keep the melting snow from soaking the ground around it, he planned to clear the snow off the roof. The fluffy snow was easy to clear, and strangely satisfying too. Before long, the roof showed its true face. In no time, snowflakes were falling softly from the sky again. The dogs that had just run off to play were back too. In the wild, survival is mostly spent gathering firewood, or heading out to gather more. To get through this cold night safely, Allo went out and brought back more firewood. By then, the light had faded. In the dusk, the snow sank into a quiet blue. Outside, the wind and snow swirled wildly. Inside the shelter, in the fire's warm glow, it was warm as spring. By then, their stomachs were already beating a steady drumbeat. They hadn't eaten all day, and both man and dog were hungry. It was time to make dinner and soothe those growling stomachs. Allo scooped a full pot of snow outside, and set it over the fire to heat. Once it had melted, he added the ribs to the pot to heat them. When the meat was cooked, he put it in the snow to cool quickly, then fed it to the pups. Allo was nothing but good to his pups. Only after feeding the dogs did he start making his own dinner. After a while, dinner was ready. The day's happy moment began. Out in the wilderness, coming across a tough combo of one man and 3 dogs. That had to be wilderness survival expert Suluo, no doubt. After a few days apart, those little pups had visibly grown stronger again, bursting with energy as they ran and jumped. But if you asked who was the sharpest in the wild, it was still the mother dog. She could always find the best hiding spot in the barren mountains. Suluo followed the mother dog to a cave. He crouched down and studied the cave's interior carefully. His brow furrowed slightly. The space was cramped and low. Even curling up in it would be uncomfortable. It was simply not suitable for long-term living. But who was Suluo? He was a famous wilderness survival master. No need for words. Just watch what his hands do. He grabbed a shovel and got to work right away, starting the cave renovation from the outside in. He dug away for half a day, with his strong build behind him. The progress was rapid. The entrance, once so narrow you could only squeeze sideways through, was now wide enough to come and go freely. The cramped, stifling interior had also been cleverly expanded into a much larger area. Now even if Suluo lay flat, there would still be plenty of space beside him. Seeing that digging further in would mean far too much work, Suluo knew full well that fighting the solid rock head-on would be a waste of effort. He immediately changed tactics and decided to expand the living space outward. At the same time, he used what was on hand, using the endless stones from the mountains to build a thick stone wall around the entrance. As the stone wall took shape, the weather suddenly got rough on him. Bitter wind and flurries of snow kept sneaking down his neck. Suluo didn't dare delay, and quickly put on his waterproof jacket, wrapping himself up tight. He also hurriedly brought over a pile of dry firewood, ready to light a fire to fend off the cold snap. Suluo pulled out a small knife and scraped wood shavings from the dry wood. This little pile of fine shavings was the key to starting a fire in the snowstorm. As soon as sparks from the ferro rod hit the shavings, the flames shot up at once. In fact, Suluo had already planned ahead when building the stone wall, leaving space for a fireplace on purpose. He quickly stuffed the shavings and firewood into the hearth, and the fire spread fast with the wood feeding it. In no time, the fireplace was blazing. Warmth surged in at once. The snow fell harder and harder. Big flakes swirled through the sky, and in no time the mountains were blanketed in white. This open shelter couldn't stand up to the storm. Suluo quickly pulled out a tarp to cover the roof. The tarp was huge, so he simply covered the outer walls too, tugging every corner tight and tying it down securely with rope. Now they no longer had to fear the wind and snow. He pinned the bottom with sturdy logs, then packed on thick snow to reinforce it. Though it was only a thin tarp, after all that work, the overall defense was rock solid. Suluo had picked a place rich in firewood, where you could find fuel just a few steps outside, and the little stove inside could now keep warmth coming non-stop. He always built his stoves with bold flare, making the firebox extra spacious, so any size of firewood could be shoved right in, saving him the trouble of splitting logs. It couldn't be more convenient. But the snow came down without restraint. The thick snow completely blocked the shelter entrance, leaving only a narrow gap. When Suluo came home, he could only squeeze in sideways. That wouldn't do. Without another word, he went out into the biting cold to clear the snow. That thin tarp was already bearing more weight than it should. Seeing that it was getting late, with the dogs by his side, Suluo busied himself stockpiling firewood. After all, he couldn't go out looking for firewood in the dark in the middle of the night. He had almost gathered all the nearby firewood, so he started exploring farther out. Fallen dead trees were his first target. Ready-made timber saves a lot of chopping effort. He sawed off the dead tree's branches. Then he carried the trunk straight back to the shelter. Sometimes brute force works miracles. It really does the trick, though it wore him out. Luckily, the fireplace inside was still roaring, warm and cozy. It instantly drove away his exhaustion. Suluo filled a small pot with snow. Then he used the shovel to adjust the hot coals in the hearth. This shovel had really been through the ringer with him. Everything was ready. Now he just had to cook the dog's dinner. While the stew simmered, he spread the blankets inside the stone cave. Tonight, he would stay with the fur babies in this warm stone cave, cuddled together, and get through the cold night. The wood in the hearth gradually burned down. The meat in the pot was falling apart. Suluo carried the pot of meat outside. He had to cool the piping hot ribs down, so the dogs could dig in and eat their fill. After setting out the dog's food, it was his turn. Suluo used a small branch to make a simple grill, and skewered the remaining ribs on it, letting them slowly roast in the lingering heat of the coals. The ribs sizzled and oozed fat on the grill. A rich meaty aroma wafted all around, though there were no secret seasonings. Fine ingredients need only the simplest cooking. You can tell from his calm expression. It was very delicious. After finally adding a few sticks of dry wood to the fireplace, Suluo then drew shut the curtain and nestled by the campfire, and drifted into a blissful sleep. This is definitely in the wilderness. A heavenly, ultra-safe shelter. Erwin, who sleeps on the ground and under the open sky, is best at uncovering hidden gems in the wild. This time he set his sights on the mountainside, a little-known natural cave, and kicked off an ultimate healing wilderness makeover. This cave is tucked in a prime spot halfway up the mountain. Wild animals can hardly get close. The dark cave walls bear the marks of time, and have a rough, heavy texture. At the same time, the cave gets plenty of light, and offers a spacious interior. Its natural conditions are uniquely excellent, the top choice for settling down in the wild. After settling the dog that came with him, and giving the little guy plenty of water, Erwin immediately picked up the shovel, and threw himself into cleaning and renovating the shelter. While clearing the cave floor, he unexpectedly dug up an old animal bone from the soil. No one knows what kind of wild animal it came from, buried deep underground for years, giving this ancient cave an added touch of mystery. Alvin didn't dwell on it, and shoveled the accumulated dirt and rubble out of the cave, scoop by scoop. The swirling dust drifted slowly in the light beams. In no time, the once messy, uneven floor was leveled and cleaned up, laying a solid foundation for the work ahead. With the basic cleanup done, Erwin began carefully planning the cave layout. He carved a neat recess in a corner of the cave, reserving a dedicated spot for the fireplace, to prepare for heating and cooking at night. If you want to live comfortably, a dedicated bed is a must. He carried stones of uniform size, and trimmed them to exact dimensions, to build a solid stone wall along the cave's centerline. The left side of the wall sat close to the mountainside, and stayed cool and breezy at night, with a pleasant temperature, making it an ideal place for a bed. He filled the gaps with stones, and tamped them down with sand and soil, creating a sturdy, durable earth and stone bed base. With a cushion added later, it would be a stable place to rest. To make the structure even sturdier, Erwin sifted out fine, clean sand, and made a special trip down the mountain, to the stream to fetch a bucket of crisp mountain snowmelt. He mixed it with dried grass and ash, stirring it thoroughly, to make the most practical natural mortar for the wilderness. Using this all-natural building material, he began stacking the fireplace layer by layer, square stones paired with fine mortar, one layer of stone, one layer of mortar, stacked on top of each other, tight and seamless, slowly building up into shape. He lit a fire to bake the wet mud, so the fireplace could dry and set quickly. The top smoke vent was cleverly designed. Once the fire was lit, the smoke flowed smoothly out through the flue, while he built the wall on this side, sealing off the smoke opening from the outside, yet keeping the indoor warmth firmly trapped inside. This structural design perfectly solved the cave's heating and smoke venting problem. This natural cave runs extremely deep. After finishing the heating area, there was still plenty of space inside, and he could keep upgrading it to add more functional areas. With the main interior facilities done, Erwin set about sealing and reinforcing the entrance. To further improve the shelter's safety, he dug a hole at the corner of the bed and buried a sturdy wooden post deep inside, as a load-bearing support for the doorframe later on. Leaving an opening on one side for the entrance, he built up the other side wall layer by layer with large stones. At every stone seam, he carefully filled and smoothed it with fine mud, leaving no gap at all, to keep the cold wind completely out. He also carefully arranged the space in front of the door, laying the remaining neatly cut stones in layers, and even building a few gentle steps on one side, to make going in and out easier and more convenient. The floor inside was covered with fine pebbles, completely cutting off the damp soil, leaving it dry and even underfoot, greatly improving living comfort. Finally came the finishing touches. Facing the irregular semicircular opening, Erwin used materials right from the site, bending flexible branches into an arched shape, and fastening them to the pre-embedded load-bearing wooden posts, to make a natural door frame that fit the opening. Then he joined multiple wooden poles together, to make a matching solid wood door panel. Installation and securing complete. The renovation work on the entire wilderness shelter has been perfectly completed, from a natural cave to a full house. Stone stove setup, with windproofing, warmth, and ventilation all included. The crude mountain cave was completely transformed into a refined, safe wilderness home. Erwin laid soft cushions on the dirtandstone bed. He hung a warm light at the cave entrance. The gentle glow bathed the rustic cave walls. The atmosphere was instantly perfect. The secret cabin hidden on the high mountainside left no trace from the outside. No one could detect it. In this hidden mountain realm, there lies such a refined, luxurious wilderness shelter. After a full day of work, it was finally time for a cozy meal. Erwin lit the fire and put water in the pot, then added chicken feet and bones to simmer. He also prepared dinner for the well-behaved dog waiting nearby. For himself, he took out a portable can and warmed it over the fire to bring out the flavor. With soft flatbread, a simple mountain meal was comforting and filling. The evening breeze slowly drifted in through the window, carrying the mountain's unique pine resin and earthy scent. Quiet and secure, in these remote deep mountains, he built a secure haven by hand, by the fire, hot food, and evening breeze, far from the city's noise, savoring the mountain's gentle embrace alone.